Well, hello everyone. Once again, just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a few people who are continuing to log in, but we also want to make sure we honor the time of those who I know have been holding for a few minutes already. My name is Tuininga, and I am one of the sales members here at the city. There we go. Sorry about the picture. Sorry about the guy that you got to listen to this morning, but I was told that I have to share this so that you know who you're chatting with. First of all, we want to begin by saying we know that this is Holy Week. Obviously, all of us here at the city are celebrating Holy Week in a number of ways, and it's a very busy time for churches, and the fact that you would take time out of your busy day, let alone your busy week, to join us is a real honor. So thank you very much for that. We get a lot of questions here at the city about why we even do these webinars and what's the point, and is this just a big commercial for the city? And the short answer to that is no. We do commercials. We call them guided tours because, hey, obviously we're pretty excited about the city and we want to share it with you. However, this is the point of this right here is not about that at all. We have the opportunity to work with thousands of pastors around the country, and really around the world. We've learned so much from them about how they do church, what they found to be extremely successful, and what we really want to do is we want to synthesize some of that information and make it available to others. One of the big things that we've heard so many times over and over is, hey, can the city help us get connected with the people in our church? We're working on our assimilation practice. One of the things that I know to be true from the people I've talked to is it seems like every church in the country is constantly either redoing their website or redoing their assimilation plan, and that's great. We think that churches should constantly be reevaluating what they're doing. So what we did in order to prepare for this today is we went out and asked quite a few of our churches. Actually, we asked all of our churches to please share feedback to us about how do you do assimilation in your church. And then I did some intensive interviews with about half a dozen different folks to really go deep and say, walk me through your process. What works really well? What would you change if you could? What's the point of assimilation? And I got some great information from some of them. So just want to call out half a dozen folks that were instrumental in helping us prepare for this particular time this morning. The folks at the Austin Stone, Seacoast, Salem Chapel in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, those guys all took quite a bit of time to sit down and talk with me. Community Church shared a great deal of feedback in terms of how they're doing some things. And what's fun about the folks that we got to talk to in order to prepare for this, the Austin Stone and Seacoast, if you're familiar with them, they're both very, very large churches, definitely what we would call a mega church, multi-campus. Seacoast is 13 campuses across 4 different states, so unbelievable level of complexity when you talk about them. But then when you look at Salem Chapel is a rapidly growing church, but they're around 800, so they're definitely a good-sized church, and they're ramping up quickly, but they're at a very different place than when you look at the Austin Stone or someone like that. Community Church, Westside, and Celebration, they're all a little bit smaller. In fact, Celebration Center out of North Bend, Oregon, I think they're about 200 or so, if memory serves correctly. So, much more in line with the vast majority of the churches in the U.S. So, when we share this morning, as I tell you stories about what we've learned, I want you to know that this isn't one church telling you how things are. This is again, just half a dozen right here that we're calling out specifically, but many churches across really the spectrum of the church community here in the U.S. Has shared with us how they do assimilation, what it means for them, what works, and to be quite frank, what doesn't. So as we talk about assimilation, we kind of titled this particular conversation, it's not about numbers, it's about people. That doesn't mean that numbers aren't important. I've heard a lot of pastors talk about, hey, numbers are vitally important. We need to know if we're making a difference, if people are coming in the door, are we growing? You're absolutely right. Numbers are important. But a number didn't come and sit next to me in the pew in church on Sunday. It was a person with a name. And if we ever lose sight of the fact that those numbers represent real people, that's where we get in trouble. So when we talk about it's not about numbers, it's not because it's not important, but it's because those numbers represent real people, and real people are what we're passionate about. We're talking about how do we close the back door? Well, we close the back door by opening the front door, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Is how do you open the front door to the church? How do you get people connected into what you're doing and what you're doing in the life of your church? Now, the answer to this is really quite simple. Every church we talked to had a very clear ending about what it meant to finish the assimilation process, and for each one of them, it was about connecting new people or returning visitors or folks who are coming into the church through the assimilation process. It's about connecting people to people. And whether that's to a small group or service or something like that, the end result of the assimilation wasn't that we wanted to create more members. It was about we want to connect them to the life of the church, and that means really connecting them into community within the church. Now, I want to say one thing that was particularly interesting. I had one pastor tell me, we realize that we can't connect everybody, and that's okay. There are certain folks that are coming through the doors of our church that don't want to be connected, and you can't force them into community. You can't force them into connection. And there were two particular groups of people that this person mentioned to me. One was what he titled major consumers. These are the folks who are coming to the church because they love the worship, or they love the teaching, or they really want their kids to be in the Sunday school class, or whatever that is, but they have no desire to actually connect to the church. They're coming for one specific thing. They're really consuming, they're taking, they're not going to be an active part of the church anytime soon. And they're choosing not to connect. And that's on them. That's not on the church. It's not that you failed or you haven't done a great job reaching out to them or giving them opportunities to connect. They're simply not going to go there anytime soon. So have grace for yourself with those individuals. If they don't connect because it's on them and it's their choice, that's not on you. Our job is to present opportunities to them, and how people respond ultimately is a matter of their own heart. The second group of people is really those who are either disillusioned with the church or have become hard-hearted for some reason. For some reason, they have something against really being involved in the church. They may be against their will. They may really feel... the question why they even show up to the church was one I asked, and not sure I got a really good answer on that. But they're folks who, for whatever reason, their heart is not that they want to connect with the church. So be aware that you won't be able to assimilate or connect with everybody that comes through the front door of your church. But here's some tools, here's some thoughts about how we can connect with the majority of them. So if we're going to talk about assimilation, we need to begin by talking about what does it even mean? What do we mean when we talk about assimilation this morning? And as you look at these three definitions right here, I don't know about you, but when I first started thinking about this topic and started chatting with others about it, my mind immediately went to the second definition, that we want to absorb people into the culture or the mores of a group. We want to help them understand, hey, what's our church about? Come get connected, find a way to really be a part of who we are. And I think that I know I'm guilty of it, and a lot of people that I've talked to, they do the same thing. It's not uncommon. That's the first place our mind goes to when we think of assimilation. But 1 and 3 here, in terms of the definitions, they really speak to the how. How do we get people connected? How do we bring them in? And if the number 3 definition here this is from Ryan Yep at the Austin Stone. He really said for them, assimilation is giving people the best opportunity to get connected. That's what it meant to them, and that's a really great practical definition. And so we're going to talk a lot about that today. That's going to be probably more than anything else. We're going to focus on giving people opportunities to get connected, because by connecting them, that's how we absorb them into the culture or the mores of a group. Now, I want to say, though, that number 1 definition, we're going to come back to that in just a second. But connecting people into the group, absorbing them into the culture or mores of a group, can actually be a very dangerous thing and can actually put people off and cause them to turn away and leave the church if we're not mindful of how we're doing that. I worked with a church in Australia recently, and in the city, one of the things that you will see is on the back end, we use the term assimilation in our administration panel to label a group, and they said, hey, that word carries a lot of weight here in Australia. There's some very, very negative connotations because assimilation was the official term used for what ultimately became a pretty terrible repression of the Aboriginal people. Now, I don't know the full context and the story of everything that's happened in Australia, and if I am missing some of the nuances, I apologize. But basically they said, that is a bad term here, and can we change that word? So be careful with even the term assimilation or the language that you use when you're talking with people, because some people might immediately react negatively to, wow, you're trying to assimilate me. That sounds like you're asking me to take have a partial lobotomy and stop thinking for myself. So you want to be careful about how we use language. And that's true, regardless of what language you use. Even if you use a totally different word, when people walk into your church, the terms that you use, the language that you use is extraordinarily important. I don't know how many of you have heard of a guy named Murillo, but he runs an organization. It's really a consulting firm called the A Group. And this isn't advertising for Murillo. I've met him a couple times, and he seems like a great guy, and he seems pretty smart. But if you write down this link, he actually tweeted yesterday all about using language in the church and what does it feel like? What does it look like for someone the first time they walk into your church? And he talked about the fact that their middle school group is called Fuse. It's the Fuse Middle School Group. Well, they changed the name recently, and now it's just Fuse. And so if I walk into the church for the first time and they talk about the Fuse meeting, I'll have no idea what that means because I wasn't there previously when it had the much longer name that actually identified what it was. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do as you think through how do we want to reconsider our assimilation process if you're actually doing that, or even just big picture evaluate our own current process and decide, are there tweaks we might want to make, is think through what's the language that you're using. And the easiest way to do this is to ask someone who's new. Ask them about, hey, was it easy for you to figure out how to get connected where you wanted to get connected? Were there any terms or was there any language we used that you didn't understand immediately? There's a dialect of the English language that is jokingly referred to as Christianese, and I think we all get caught up in it sometimes. I know I'm certainly one who does. But if someone's brand new to the church, you want to be mindful of that. So be mindful of your language as you do that. Another great way to figure that out is actually go and visit a new church, somewhere that you've never been before, and just look at how they use words and how they define groups and service opportunities and organizations even within the church, and ask, do I feel comfortable here as a new person? Am I connecting here? Especially for folks who are either new to the faith or just checking out, asking the question, well, who is Jesus? There's a church down the street. I might go there because a friend of mine does. You want to be very mindful that of their perceptions as they walk into the church. All right, as we move further into this discussion, one of the things I do want to let you know is we want to answer questions as they come up and as you have them. So on your GoToMeeting box that popped up when you first logged in, one of the things that you should have seen was a little chat box there. And if you fill out a chat question, or if you use the questions piece, either one, depending on if they're both open for you or not, feel free to fill those out. And preferably the questions, and we will answer those as we go. Tim Ellsbury, who's one of our regional managers, is on the call with us today, and he will be answering those questions via the text here as we go. Love to open up the call to everyone who's on it, but we have a lot of people on this call, and it would quickly become pandemonium. So feel free to ask questions. We will get to those and respond via text as we go through this here today. So when you think about your assimilation process, first thing I would encourage you to do is begin with the end in mind. A lot of you are probably familiar with Stephen Covey. He encourages you to do this in lots of areas, and it's a great point. The question is, what's the point of your assimilation process? What are you trying to accomplish with it? A lot of people think, I got to have an assimilation process. Well, to do what? What do you mean by that? What's the goal? And then the second question is, how do you know when it's over? This was a question that actually caught some people off guard when I asked it. It's like, well, when does the assimilation process end? And there was like, but gosh, we don't really have a definition on that. Okay, there's an indication that you might want to consider your assimilation process and ask yourself, what's the point and how do you know when it's over? The most common answer I got really impressed me. Almost every church in fact, every church I talked to, I was expecting one particular answer as far as what it meant to end the assimilation process, and no one gave me the answer. I thought the assimilation process was going to end when someone became a member of the church. And not a single church I talked to said that that was the end of their process. They had different answers for it, but every single one of the answers really fed into one overarching theme, and that overarching theme was that someone was connected to other people in the church. They were connected to community somehow. And whether that was in a service group, whether that was in a small group, an affinity group of some kind, they were connected to other people in a deeper way within the church than they were when they started. And I thought that was fascinating, and that actually really encouraged me, because what that tells me is that these people really cared about the hearts and lives of the people who were coming through the doors of the church. So, through the conversations we had, I boiled the information down, synthesized it all, and really came up with there are 6 major steps to assimilation. And we're going to walk through each one of these today. And this might not be perfectly true for your church. It certainly, no 6 steps could possibly be true for every single church out there. But as we interviewed churches and gathered this information, these are the themes that came up over and over and over again. And as we tried to categorize them, this is what really came out. There's an onboarding step. There's assigning someone to actually follow up with someone in the assimilation process. There's reaching out to that new person. And then there's, in the tradition of many great pastors, I want to give you 3 I's. There's invite, inform, and involve. So I'm going to walk through each one of these steps right now and share with you what churches are doing for each one of these individual steps. And we will talk a little bit later about how the city can help in these areas. But again, that's not the point of the call here today. It's really just sharing what we've learned from churches about what assimilation means and how they're doing it. Step 1, onboarding. How do you get information from people? How do you initially connect with them? As you can see from this list right here, there are lots and lots of opportunities to connect with individuals. Your greeters and your ushers, the people who are standing in the lobby, the foyer, or the narthex of your church, depending on what kind of a church you have, those are folks that can reach out and get to know folks and begin to connect with them. Lots of churches have a welcome center or a connect desk. Great. Give people a place where it's easy for them to identify, where do I go to connect with people here at the church? Lots of churches at their connect desk or the welcome center, they may have connect cards, or those come out in the bulletin, or they get handed to someone as they first walk in, and I can throw that in the offering plate as it comes around, or maybe there's a box in the back I can put it in at the end of the day. Lots of churches using the city use the kiosk. Great way to connect people, and the kiosk might be at your welcome center or at the connect desk. We have a mobile view on the kiosk, so our kiosk can actually be anywhere on a smartphone. The children's ministry of your church is a great connection point, because if I walk into a new church and I've never been there before and I have my 2 little kids with me, very first place I'm going is to drop my kids off for the service. What a great way to begin connecting with me, because let's be honest, if I'm a parent, the thing that I'm probably most passionate about in this world is my kids. Or at least, they're going to be very, very high on that list of things I'm most passionate about. So children's ministry, great place to connect with folks. And finally, there's other technology. Facebook, Twitter. The Austin Stone does a great job of using their website, and they've built Wufoo forms on there where their website is really the front door to their church. And they know that, and lots of people are finding their website through a Google search, or they know how to go and look for it. And then there's a form there they can fill out and connect. And they're able to capture information about people. So that's great. Your onboarding process is very important to bring people in. The members of your church, and member here is it's not necessarily the word I should use. The regular attenders, the actively involved people of your church, are also part of the connection process. I go to a church here in Seattle called Bethany Community Church, and over the last 10 years, Bethany has doubled in size, I think 3 times now. We used to be a church of about 400 or 500, moved into a brand new sanctuary that we built on our current site, and went to a church almost immediately of close to 1,000. In the last, I think 2 years now, maybe 3, we've gone from a church of 1,000 to Sunday before last we had 2,200 people in church. And what's amazing about Bethany's story is nothing's really changed. We've had the same senior pastor for 15 years. We haven't brought on tons of new staff. We haven't begun a whole bunch of new programs. It's one of those things that if you know why we're growing, we'd love to hear it, because we're still trying to figure it out. I think the simple answer is God is on the move, and the Holy Spirit is doing something pretty remarkable in this church that has been faithful in the community for over 60 years. But one of the complaints that we've heard a lot is it's really hard to get connected here. And our community groups pastor is a friend of mine, and we were having a conversation one night about it, and he got so frustrated because he kept hearing this over and over and over again, and we talked through it a lot, and he said, you know what I've discovered, Eric, is I'm hearing this from people, and when I ask them, well, how long have you been here? And, why is it so hard to get connected? Well, I've been here for about 6 months, and, no one sitting next to me reaches out to me. No one, invites me to anything. No one's telling me about things going on in the church. And he said, if you've been here for 6 months, you've been here longer than probably half the people in the church. And as a result, you're the person who should be reaching out to them. And it was really kind of a splash of cold water in a lot of ways. It was like, wow, I'm wanting other people to reach out to me, but it might already be on me to reach out to others. And that's going to be particularly true for churches that are growing. That person that I think should be reaching out to me, who's sitting next to me, may be somebody that I need to reach out to. So your members, your participants, you're actively engaged. They're definitely part of your reaching out and onboarding process. Have a plan for your onboarding process. You're going to gather information about folks. Who gets that information? Where does it get stored? Who has access to it later? These are really important questions to understand, because if you fill out a bunch of Connect cards and then those Connect cards go into a file drawer somewhere, they're not doing much for you. If you put it into a database and the only people that have access to the database are your administrators, it's probably not serving you as well as it could. So ask yourself those questions about what happens with the information as you collect it on new folks that come into your church. Next step is to assign an individual to follow up with your newcomers. This individual is someone who needs to be passionate about the church. There are lots of folks who are passionate about your church. I just know it, because every church I've been into, there's someone in that church who's really passionate about the church. They need to be warm. They need to be outgoing. I think we've all served in ways where we're not particularly gifted or enthused about serving that area. And out of obedience, we may work through it, and it really becomes something of a grind, but we do it. If you have folks who are really gifted at being accountants, or maybe they are software developers and they love writing code, those probably aren't the people that you want standing and being greeters and following up with your newcomers. But if you have people who have the gift of hospitality, they have the gift of gab, if you will, if they can talk to a lamppost and actually have a really interesting conversation, those are people that you want to be part of your team that follows up with new folks. And finally, you want them to be reliable. Because the most important, maybe not the most important thing, one of the very important things you want to consider as you follow up with folks is speed. You want to connect to people very, very quickly, because you have a window of opportunity to follow up with someone when they're new that will make them feel like, hey, these guys cared enough about me to reach out to me and acknowledge that I was in their church, and they want to know me. So they need to be reliable. Do they have to score a 10 out of 10 on all 3 of these points? No, of course not. But, be mindful, use your best judgment about who the individuals are that you would have reach out to new folks. When you reach out to new folks, the other thing that you're going to want to do is when you identify those individuals who are following up with them, you want to make sure that you equip them. Have you provided them the tools to follow up with them? I asked earlier, what are you going to do with the information you collect? Who has access to it? These individuals who are following up with someone, they absolutely should have that information in front of them. Because if they have a Connect card that tells them, oh, this person lives in this particular neighborhood in town, or I know that they're a parent of elementary school kids, or that they're interested in finding a small group, or no, I know that this person is divorced and you know, in a really hurting place in life. If you have provided the information to them, so when they contact them, they might know some landmines not to step on, or they might know some areas where they can really minister to the person and care for them in an important way. So make sure you're providing them the tools. It may be, hey, we're going to provide you a very, very small stipend on a monthly basis because you're using your personal cell phone to make these calls, and you know you don't have the money to add 200 minutes to your monthly cell phone bill. Great. Is that a tool you can provide with them? Do you provide them an email address from the church? They may just be a volunteer, but maybe that's a good idea. And then make sure you train them. Give them, just some, and part of training is setting clear expectations. Help them understand, what do we expect of you as a volunteer with the church following up with folks that we want you to do with these individuals when you reach out to them. So make sure you're equipping the people that you're assigning to follow up with these individuals for later. I'm going to go back a slide here because there's something that I wanted to, that I forgot to mention. On this list of characteristics, notice what I didn't put on here. I didn't put on here staff. I didn't put on here that this person's an elder at the church. I didn't put on that they're a deacon of the church. I didn't even put on that they're a member of the church yet. That one is probably one that you might want to put on here depending on your membership process within the church. But it doesn't have to be a staff person who's following up with new folks in the church. The truth is, a staff person doesn't have the same level of similarities with a new person walking into your church as a volunteer who's not on staff would. There's a perception about, staff person in a church, they're going to be holier than I am, they're going to be better than me, they're going to be more spiritual, whatever. If that person reaches out to me, they're not going to begin on that same plane as someone who says, yeah, I live down the street from you, and I work at, I'm a teacher, or I work at the post office, or I sell insurance, and I'm not trying to sell you insurance, I just love my church and I'm reaching out to you. So volunteers are a great person to have do your follow-up here. So I'm going to skip back down. We're going to go to the next slide. The next step after assigning the individual to follow up is reaching out. And reaching out, these are the very common steps that most churches told me they do. They want to have a phone call right away to a new individual, usually within 24 hours. So that person knows, hey, we recognize that you were in church today, we're caring for you, we want to contact you. Some churches, instead of doing a phone call first, they would do an email first, or a message on the city, which is tied to email. So they're reaching out, letting someone know, hey, we acknowledge that you were in church. Not only are we acknowledging it, thank you for joining us. We're so glad you are here. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what you experienced, and is there anything that you need? A lot of churches will very quickly in this process, in the reaching out process, do a personal visit. Some churches that I've talked to do a cookie brigade. There's a church in just outside of Dallas, Texas, in a town called Southlake. That's White's Chapel United Methodist Church, and I attended there quite a while when I lived in Texas. And the first time I showed up at church, I filled out the little Connect card, let them know I was there. And I think it was a day or two later, a lady from the church showed up on my doorstep, and she had a mug, and the mug was full of homemade chocolate chip cookies. Now, it might have been because I was a single guy, and living the bachelor lifestyle, but someone who shows up with a homemade baked treat, they get a lot of points in my book. And I went back, and I became a very regular attender and participant in that church. So different things depending on your culture and where you're at. Use different steps, but make sure you do them quickly, and make sure that they're personal. You'll notice that these are all very, very personal steps here. This is not a form letter from the pastor. This is not just a blanket email to everyone who was new today. This is something that's personalized and has a very high touch factor. I had a great conversation with Sean Wood from Seacoast about their process. And one of the things that he mentioned to me is that because they're so big, they need to be very high-tech in their approach to following up with new individuals. Because if they're not high-tech, they're going to lose information. They're not going to use it very well. but he said that they're being very strategic and focusing a lot of efforts on being high touch in that process as well. They want to make sure that as a great big church, that they can behave like a small church, and using technology that can actually help them to be high touch. So make sure that your steps are personal here. If you do want to mail something to someone, based on the feedback that I receive from churches, I would recommend a handwritten postcard. Something that says, this isn't mass produced, but you actually produced this for me, because people are definitely going to respond to that. Because this is personal. This is about a real live person with a name reaching out to another real live person with a name and getting to know them. It's not about trying to add someone to the membership roll. It's not about, carving another notch in your spiritual belt. It's really about just caring for an individual here. Part of the training that I would suggest when you assign an individual to follow up is that you teach them to make sure that they know how to let these people know that they're valued. I think the encounter of Jesus with a woman who was bleeding when she touched the hem of his garment is a perfect one here. When she did that, he was on his way somewhere. He was going to go heal someone's child, and it was a very important official. But when she touched his cloak, and here's this woman who was unclean and very low on the social ladder, he stopped and he listened to her whole story. And I think that if you're an individual who's reaching out to someone new, just stops and introduces himself and cares for him a little bit and just spends time listening, that's going to go so far for endearing them to your church, which is going to be a good thing ultimately for them, because your church is going to help them in a bunch of different ways that are great. There was a quote on the very first slide, and I don't know if you saw it. I used to be, still am, but I've been involved with an organization called Young Life for many, many years, and the founder of Young Life is famous for a quote, and I have no idea if he's truly the first person who said it or not, but we always gave him credit for it, that said, kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that's very, very true for all people. We want to know that someone cares about me. And if all you want to do is come and start shoving information down my throat, and I don't know that you actually care about me, I'm going to put my hand up and tell you that your turn is over. I'm done listening to you. But if you come and you ask me questions about me and you get to know me personally and let me know that you actually care about me, wow, I'm going to be really interested in who you are. So one of the things that your individuals who are reaching out here, part of the reaching out isn't asking for a big commitment. If you've ever been to a fundraiser of any kind, you know that at some point in the fundraiser there's always what is known as the ask. And the ask is usually, hey, we want you to support what we're doing and write us a check. It's a crucial piece of any fundraiser. But you want to be careful with your ask at the church and make sure that your volunteers know what is the ask. Because the ask at this point isn't for anything big. The ask at this point is really, hey, share your life with us as we share ours with you, so that you know that we care about you. I don't know if you noticed, but I have a communication background, and there's lots of different theories around how people communicate, and the fact that we all start at a very surface level, and then we move deeper as we get to know one another. And the folks who lack communication skills tend to jump to the deeper levels too soon. Hey, you're new to the church. Let me tell you the sin that I really struggled with and how this church helped me overcome it. Wow, you know what? As a new person, I might not be ready to hear that, and I'm certainly not ready for you to ask me about mine. Altman and Taylor are known for their social penetration theory, which really says make sure that you're taking steps deeper at an appropriate pace. Next step in the process is to invite. We want to invite someone into something in the church, and the important thing to recognize here is that when you invite someone into something, you're inviting them to something that is very appropriate. Now, the next step is inform. It goes invite, inform, and involve. Invite and inform tend to go back and forth a little bit. They're a little interchangeable, and they're actually both occurring at the same time. So these are not hard. You have to do this and then this. These things do go back and forth a little bit. But on invite, what would somebody be interested in? If I called someone up for the first time and started to hear their story, and they started telling me about things that that they were interested in, or areas of their life, that they were working on, or even why did they show up at the church for the first time? They may say, hey, yeah, I came to the church because my neighbors go there and their kids love it, and I've never been to a church where kids actually want to go back, so I thought we'd check it out. Great. Well, you know what? We've got an event for kids coming up next Saturday. Would love to invite you there. So find out things about people, find out what they're interested in, and then invite them to be a part of something like that. Maybe it's an event, a concert. Several churches that I talked to had a plan that, hey, we want to invite you to an informational session on the church. Again, I'll reference Seacoast here. For a long time, they invited folks to a membership information class that took place after church on Sundays. And one of the things they discovered is that people were very hesitant to come to a membership information class because they felt like a really, really large commitment. I'm not ready to become a member yet. I just came into this church. I'm not going to go there because I'm not ready to sign on the dotted line. So they've actually changed the name of it. They're no longer calling it a membership information class. They're actually just calling it an informational session, which makes a lot of sense. Again, you want to be very careful with the language that you're choosing. But the Austin Stone and Salem Chapel, they both invite folks into an informational session. And part of that is we want to give you the opportunity to connect personally with some of the leadership in the church. There's often a kind of a pedestal that we put church staff on, and you know what? We should have respect for them, but we shouldn't put them on a pedestal because we're all human. You know, we all live under grace, and that's the only reason that we're able to do what we do. And so let's knock that pedestal down a little bit. And informational sessions where you have staff from the church meeting individually or in groups with folks who are coming in can go a long, long way to doing that. And that's a huge service to your church. If you invite someone to something, one of the things that's important, I think, is to offer to meet them there. Just say, hey, we've had a chance to get to know each other a little bit. And would you, invite them to say, hey, I'll meet you there. Because then you'll know someone, and you'll know that someone there cares about you, and it's not quite as awkward. And if you do that, make sure part of your training of your folks who are reaching out is tell them, make sure you're 5 minutes early. There's nothing worse than as a new person walking in and knowing that you're supposed to meet someone somewhere, and that person shows up late. So as you equip your volunteers, part of your training is, even if you're not a punctual person, in this regard, you need to be early. 5 minutes is on time. 5 minutes early is going to be late. We want you there 10 minutes early. Next step in the process, and again, these are interchangeable, is really inform. Give people a chance to ask questions. As you get to know them, invite questions from them and say, we want to tell you about what's going on with the church. And as a result, you're going to be able to answer some of these things, about informational sessions and next steps and how do I connect to things in the church. Some church, in order to connect to a small group, they do a small group connection, which is, maybe it's once a quarter or once a month, and everybody shows up, and you go and you meet some of the small group leaders, and that's how they do their big connect to small groups or community groups. Other churches, you go and you find it on their website. Lots of churches, obviously, that we're talking to are using the city. So inform people. How do you find information out that you're looking for about the church? So the informational piece is huge, helping people to understand, just what they don't know, and providing that for them. The other piece that's really important here is help them understand what are some very clear next steps that they may want to take. As I mentioned before, membership is a huge hurdle for some people. So make the next steps very easy for them to take, and make it very clear what those next steps might be. With Salem Chapel, they tell people in their informational sessions, hey, there are 3 next steps we would love for you to consider taking with us. One is get on the city. Because if you're on the city, you can learn so much about who we are. You can be a part of our conversations. You can understand what we care about, what we're passionate about, because we're sharing prayer requests there. It's where we tell you about upcoming events, and it's where we have discussions on, what's going on in the church, and people are sharing needs there. So we want you there. And then we also would love for you to, join a small group. Meet other people, get connected to folks who are in your community, and you might realize that, somebody that you stand on the sideline with at a soccer game for your kids also attends church here, and they're one of your neighbors, and you didn't even know it. So get involved in a small group, and then get involved in a service group. So they have 3 very distinct, clear things that they tell people, this is what it looks like to take the next step with us. Seacoast has really boiled it down to 2. They said, hey, we want you to get on the city for many of the same reasons, but also we want you to come to a newcomers welcome reception. So you can come in and find out more about us and learn what it means, who we are, what's our history, who are the people that work here, who can you call if you have a need or a question. And it's high information, low commitment. Because, again, if someone's new to the church, they might not be willing to take huge steps. So allow them to take small steps. Figure out ways to do that. My church, one of the things I love about it is we do in between, we have a 4 p.m. service and a 6 p.m. service on Sunday nights, and we do a meal in between. And we invite all new folks, hey, you know what, you got to eat, and food's right here, and rather than having to go home and make a dinner, if you want to walk over, we're having dinner together right now. And you're providing folks food, you're breaking bread together, which is, I think, just great. Low commitment, and someone there might just start talking to you and get to know you a little bit. And as an institution, churches can be pretty intimidating, but really the church is the body of believers, and as we get to know people on that individual and that personal level, you break down a lot of those walls, and that's so important and such a critical factor in the assimilation piece. Also let people know how can they discover on their own things about the church. Again, the city's a great way to do that if your church is using the city, invite people into it, but also your website should be a great resource for people to go and learn about the church. When did the church start? What is what are the core beliefs of the church? What do they expect of me? When do they meet? Yeah, just because I go to a church on Sunday morning and I walked in to the 11 o'clock service doesn't mean I know that there's a 5 p.m. Saturday night service. So make sure those things are very visible and easy for folks to discover. Your church should definitely be on Facebook. If your church isn't on Facebook, you're to state it bluntly, you're missing an opportunity to connect with 600 million people. So definitely be out on Facebook and control your presence and your brand on Facebook. Don't assume that, I know that someone in my church actually created a Facebook page. There's a liability in that if they've created that Facebook page under your name and it's not controlled by the church and they're using your logo. Make sure that as a church you have a strategy for how you're using Facebook. Let people know that you have past sermons and events and things like that recorded out on YouTube. Publicize the great things that you've already done as a church so that people can discover some of that information on their own. And then finally, the last step really is about involving. Help folks understand how they can get involved in the church. And again, begin with easy steps. But as I mentioned before, every church that I talked to about what's your assimilation process look like, for those that had a clear ending, it was never membership, it was always involvement. Involvement in a small group, involvement in a service team, involvement in some sort of community within the church. I love that because if I'm invested in the people of my church, then I'm actually invested in my church because it is people that make up that make up my church. So a couple quick things. One, I know one of the questions we're going to get at the end of this is, hey, can we have a copy of this slide deck? Absolutely, we'll make this available for you. Right now, I can tell you that you can certainly get the slide deck by sending an email to us at connectedonthecity.org, and I'll make sure you get one. And then we'll also work at getting this posted on our website very quickly. But one of the things that we want to do right now is I want to jump into the city itself, because I know that there are a lot of folks on board right now that are a part of churches using the city, and so we want to show you, hey, what are some ways that you can use the city to actually take some of these steps with individuals. And I know there's a lot of churches out there that are interested in knowing more about how the city can possibly help with that. So I'm going to jump over to the city right now. We're going to walk through each of these 6 steps and show you how the city can help in each one of these individual areas. So first off, there are several different ways that the city can help with the onboarding process. The first way is just capturing information about people. So this is the city's kiosk right here. And you can have a kiosk open on an iPad. You can have it open on a smartphone. You can have it open at a computer in your church. You can actually link to a kiosk directly from your website. So if I'm browsing your website and I want to know more, I could sign up for the city right here on what's called a kiosk. This is not a hard, built thing that has to sit in the corner of your lobby. A kiosk simply means it's running on an open browser. And what's great about this is as I fill out this information, this directly populates your database of information about an individual, and now you can take this information, and as I mentioned before, you need to make this available to certain folks. You need to equip your individuals who are following up with newcomers if I fill this information out, we give you ways to make this very easily available to those people who are following up. Another means of onboarding that we mentioned was children's ministry. So the children's ministry module, when I walk into a church for the very, very first time, if I have little kids, the first place I'm probably going is to check my kids in. And depending on the size of your church and the needs that you have to manage check-in of children, you probably have some sort of a system in place where you're capturing information. And maybe it's all done on paper. That's totally fine. But in the city, if I've never been to the church, there's probably someone who's walking me through this. And as they say, this new person isn't a city user. The first thing they're collecting information about me. And as I put in this information about me, this information goes straight into your database. So I don't have to even fill out a Connect card in church this morning because I populate this information right here. It goes into the city. You now have access to it. You can share it with the members of your Assimilation team who might follow up with me later. The next thing I'm going to put in is information about my kids. We use a barcode scanning system, and this is asking me to scan a barcode that I carry because I get to use one that I already have. So I'm just kind of breezing through this process really quick here because this is not a commercial for our children's check-in. The last piece of information that I'm going to put in is information about my kids. So again, when we talk about an onboarding process, I walked up to children's ministry with my children. You got my name, my contact information. You're now capturing information about my kids. You're going to know how old they are. You talk about a great piece of information to equip your person following up with me. Hey, when you call Eric, you should know that he has 2 little kids. One's in preschool and the other's in 2nd grade. Someone calls me and knows that about me, or that might actually even lead you to assign me to a certain person who also has small children, because those kids might go to my kid's school, and now I'll have an immediate connection point. So use the information that you're gathering to strategically follow up with individuals, because hey, it's people like people who are in similar life stages to them, and simply by checking kids into the children's ministry at your church, you may actually be able to take some of that information and connect them to someone who is going to be very effective at following up with them. So we have lots of great, easy ways to onboard information. And finally, if you have a Connect card, you can obviously fill that information out in the city and populate that in the city through the kiosk, which we talked about earlier. You could have a team of volunteers who takes your Connect cards and simply fills this information in right here, or depending on how your church works, they may go into the admin panel and create a new, what we call an offline user here in the city, and they could go in and populate the information that they collected on the Connect card. Now, what's great about this, when you collect information about new folks in the city, you can create an offline user. Someone may go up and sign up online, and then they're an online user, and so you have information because they actually were proactive and filled out a kiosk or something like that, or you'd invited them to the city on another time. Once you have that information in the city through the kiosk, or you created an offline user in the admin panel, or someone signed up on their own, you can assign them to what we call a Connect group. Now, Connect group on the city, I've named this particular Connect group Assimilation. And so this is a screen that I would see as a volunteer. You've made me, we call them Connect group agents. You've made me a Connect group agent in this Assimilation group, and then you've assigned these individuals to me to follow up with them. So you can see here that Louis Crawford has been assigned to me, and Marissa has, and Joe has as well. If I click on other participants, I can see all of the people who are currently going through our assimilation process, and I can see how many people are in which stage of this particular process. If I click on agents here, I can see all the individuals that are volunteers, and maybe they're staff people at your church, but these are the folks that you can assign new people to follow up with them. So if someone was assigned to me by mistake, for instance, we'll click on Assign to Me again, and I see Marissa here, and I think, you know what? Maybe I learned a little something about Marissa. I learned that she's, maybe she's a freshman in college, she's new to the area, whatever. And I think, I might not be the best person to follow up with her. Maybe as someone in his late 30s who's married with a family, I think that a woman would be better to follow up with Marissa, because that would be more appropriate. I can change the agent right here, assign Marissa to someone else, and then maybe Allison would be more appropriate to follow up with her. So just because someone gets assigned to somebody once doesn't mean that that should always be the case. Have flexibility where as you get to know someone, maybe someone else is the better person to take the next step with them. This assimilation process that we've built out here with these different stages of new, phone call, invited to a welcome reception, cookie drop off, and connected, these stages are totally customizable by you as a church. If I click on the tools icon right here, you can see here that I can change the stages. I can add a stage if I want. The great thing about this is now you have insight into how many people are in this assimilation process, how many people are in which stage of the process. If I click back here, you can see how long have different people been in a particular stage. So we give you great information about how effective you're being at moving people through. But if my job is to follow up with Louis here, you can see that he's an offline user. He's never been on the city. He doesn't have a clue what it is. He might not know that he's been assigned to me. But if I click on contact information here, didn't fill out on this guy because this is a demo environment. These people don't actually exist. But if let's see, did we put some? Yeah, we put some in under Joe. So when I created Joe as an offline user, put in his email and his phone number and his street address here, I could send Joe an email. I could also send him, I can give him a phone call. I have access to his information here. Again, you need to equip your volunteers. You need to equip the people who are following up with folks with the right information so that they know how to follow up with him. If I click on notes here, as I get to know him, when I call Joe, I can take notes here that will be visible to me later. If Joe signs up and actually uses the city, then not only can I take notes on the individual, but I can also see a history of messages as we go back and forth. And I think we have that here with Conrad. You can see that I sent a message to Conrad using the city. Now the city will automatically take that message and send Conrad an email. Conrad's going to get that email. He can reply to his email, and his email will actually become a message here on the city, part of this conversation, and it will all track right here so that now you're giving your leadership team who's over your volunteers insight into how this process is going. Because if maybe I'm the pastor of outreach at a church and I want to see how my volunteers are doing, I can come in and I can look at this information as well. So you get insight and information into what's going on in the church. And as I get to know Conrad, you can see that his current status is he's invited to the welcome reception. I might follow up with him later, and he said, hey, you know what? I'm having a great time, and I have some more questions, and we might have a longer dialogue back and forth about questions he's got about the church. And so I'm helping to inform him. So we've moved from gathering information, from onboarding. We've talked about reaching out, whether that's through a phone call or emails, and then you can use the city to take notes. And you can see here I placed a note in here that I met him at church. And I might put in here that he went to the visitor reception or the newcomer reception, and is interested in a small group. Great. So I put that information in here. It will add to the ongoing notes that I have about Conrad, and then these are always available to others. So again, onboarding. We captured Conrad's information. I've reached out to him. I'm beginning to get him to know him personally. I'm keeping track of the information here. And now we're in the invite and inform. And we've invited him to the welcome reception, might invite him to the small group. But part of the informing is saying, hey, Conrad, have you used the city to kind of explore who we are as a church? Because Conrad can go into one of the groups that he's going to be a part of. If he joins the city, everybody's automatically put into the church level group. So he won't have this whole long list of groups over here. He will have his community, the church as a group, and he may have a neighborhood if your church sets up neighborhoods. And so he'll have Grace Fellowship Church, and he can read the topics. He can go and look at the events that are coming up at the church. He can look at the prayers that the church currently has going on. He could look at the needs, and he can begin to learn about some of the things that the church has been involved in the past, as well as the things that it's currently doing. So this is a great informational piece about what's going on in the church. How does this work? What is this church passionate about? If he goes into prayers and he continually sees that this church is praying for, what's going on in the world. Maybe, hey, there's constantly prayers about what's going on in Japan and the Middle East, and we're praying for folks in Africa. And you can see, wow, this is a church that has a huge heart for the world. Or he may say, wow, this church is constantly lifting up in prayer the schools around us, and he realizes this is a church that has a huge heartbeat for the schools and reaching the youth in the community. Using the city to simply read what's gone on in the past is a great way for folks to gather information. It's also a great way for them to have small steps to go to involvement and to say, hey, what are some of those next steps I can take as a church? And that's the informed piece. The involved piece might be, hey, if I'm logged in as Conrad and I realize that I really like this church, I might say I'm going to jump back into that assimilation page, I might say to the person following up with me, hey, I'd love to find a small group. Do you have any recommendations of ones that you think might be good for me? Well, as a small group agent, a connect group agent, I can go in and I can say, hey, I want to help Conrad find a life group. Or maybe he said he wants to serve, I could help him find a service group. So if I click on find a life group, this will take me to a map that centers on Conrad, because this is where he lives. He puts his address into the city, and I can zoom out a little bit, and I can see the different small groups that meet around Conrad's house. And I can click on one of them, and it will tell me whose small group it is. I could click on Uptown Community Group. It would take me to a page that tells me a little bit more about that group. If I know Howie, and I think, you know what? I think Howie and Conrad have a lot in common, and this might be a good group for him. I can say I want to connect Howie and Conrad, and this begins a three-way email conversation where I can introduce Howie and Conrad to each other and say, Howie meet Conrad, Conrad meet Howie. And what's great about this is a warm introduction. This is me saying to Conrad, who is brand new to the church, and I've got to know him, and I've walked alongside him a little bit. I'm not just pawning you off and telling you someone's going to contact you later. I'm introducing you, and I'm actually still a part of this conversation. And so it's that small, easy step. It's that low hurdle to clear that says, hey, let's keep you involved with someone that you have gained trust in and you have confidence in them. Keep you involved with them as you begin to take that next step in the process. I'm going to jump back into that page we were on earlier. This is the page again this one right here. This is a page that Conrad might be looking at when he's logged into the city. Conrad could go in and do his own group search if he wanted to as well. He can go in and click on group search right here, and it will take him to roughly the same page where he can look at groups by name and description, or he can click on the map and he can do that same map search. And he can say, you know what, I'm looking for a group that meets on Tuesdays, or maybe I only want to see a group that's good for folks who are single and college age, because that's where I'm at in life. So if I click on single college age here and I'm signed in as Conrad, I'm only going to see the groups here that match the things that I'm interested in. So we make it easy for people to discover the great things that are going on in your church. Maybe Conrad's more interested in finding a service opportunity. Great. He could actually click on growth right here and say, I want to see all the service opportunities in the church, and he can actually go and self-discover or discover on his own the opportunities that where he could serve in the church. And if he wanted to be a nursery volunteer or he wanted to be an usher and he said, I can help, it doesn't mean he's a nursery volunteer immediately, because nursery volunteers usually need to go through a background check and there's usually some training involved and things like that. But if he said, this is an area I care about, he can say, I can help, and it will now begin a conversation with him and the individual who's in charge of capturing this information about him. The final thing I want to show you on the city about how this helps folks get connected is one of the things that individuals are going to do when they do sign up for the city, and if this is part of your assimilation process, is encouraging them to get connected on the city. They're going to fill out their account settings in their profile. So I'm logged in as Israel right here. And you can see this in my profile, and we give them a place to put a little bit about me. This is great because it helps you get to know someone and capture more information. I can put information in about my family. I can share how much and how public is that information. I could say don't put my children on my profile if I wanted to. On the contact information page, the same thing. When I put this information in here, I get to choose how public is this. Do I want to show it to members of the church? Do I only want to show it to my friends in the city? If I don't check either of those boxes, no one gets to see my phone number except staff. I can do the same thing on addresses and say who gets to see my address, public, friends, members, or is it private? And if I say it's private, then only staff get to say that. But one of the things that I really love, because I think this is such a great connection point for folks, is I can fill out a skills list. And as a church, you would get to define what are the skills that you care about and that you want people to let you know that they might have. So you get to create your own list here, and it's very easy to do. But you can see here that Israel has said he has a skill in art. There may be a need at your church that comes up because you're going to do a new sermon series for after Easter, and you want to do a really cool backdrop around the altar area, and you need some folks who have a skill in art to come and help you design that. You can type in the word art up here in this search box and say, I'm looking for art as a skill. And when you click on that, art as a skill, what it will do is it will take you to a page that shows you a list of all the people who have raised their hands and said, hey, I have a skill in art, and I'd love to help the church when there's a need. And so now, rather than having to make an announcement in church on Sunday morning, or rather than having to put a message in a bulletin, you could say, I want to send a message directly to the folks who've already raised their hand and told me they have a skill in art. And when I type this message out in here, I'm not directly targeting the people that can actually help me. And for a new person who fills out information about themselves, if they receive a message saying, hey, I saw that you have a skill in this area, would you be interested in coming and helping us in this area? People love to meet other people who have interests that are similar to theirs. So great, not only are you inviting me to serve in an area where I might be interested in actually serving, but you're giving me an opportunity to meet other people who are passionate in that area too, which I might very quickly become friends with these folks. So again, so many tools to help you make it very, very easy to connect people to areas where they might be passionate about or are appropriate for their life stage and what they're going through. So again, want to say, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and finish. We're right at about an hour in. We want to honor your time, and it's Holy Week, and we know that there's a lot going on in this most important week of the church calendar. So if you have questions, we would love to follow up with you. Feel free to contact us. You can contact us by either sending us an email at connectedonthecity.org, or there's a contact us page on our website. If you go to our website, just want to let you know, we do have more of these conversations coming up. If you click on resources, we have regular city conversations, and you can see that we have one coming up on Twitter best practices for the church. This is the current one, obviously. We have past conversations that we've done as well, and we record these, and we'll make this particular recording available online, so you can come in and you can see, here's an interview we did with Chad McDonald, and one we did with the folks down at Seacoast on driving congregational engagement. So feel free to come to our conversations page. You can see some of the conversations that we have in some of our upcoming ones. We also have a white paper on assimilation practices. So if you go into the resources and into the decision-making guide, you can see we have an assimilation best practices white paper here. We're happy to share that with you as well. And finally, if you would like to learn more about the city, two things. One, we would love for you to join us for a guided tour. And you can see, if I go back to the homepage here, I know it's in another place. First of all, you can watch lots of videos on our features page. They can give you information, but you can also take a guided tour by following this link here, or it's also on our homepage. We do these webinars where we really do go into the city pretty deeply, and you can sign up for one of our webinars here. Just let us know, and we'd love to show you how the city works. And finally, if you have questions, you can fill out this contact us page, give us a call. Here's our phone number, here's our email address, or fill out this contact us page, and we will be sure to reach out to you. Final thing that we would like to ask you to do is just let us know if you're interested in learning more about the city. We'll be happy to reach out to you and let you know, or pardon me, If you fill out and say yes, we would love to have you contact us, we will. If not, say no, we won't contact you right now, but we would love to talk to you later. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Hope you have a great Easter. We look forward to talking to you again soon. God bless you all.